All right, welcome back. Here is 10 more things for TinyGlade. 10 tips, tricks, techniques, ideas, 10 things. I will once again put chapter markers in the description, and here's a timestamp for the first thing. However, a couple of things that are going to be different in this video. First of all, I'm going to do less building from the ground up. Tricks that I think you're gonna understand without me doing them from scratch. I'll just show you on a map like this that I already have ready. That's number one. And number two is a lot more of these things this time around are from other people on the TinyGlade Discord primarily, and I'll tell you about that as we get to them. However, therefore, this is a lot more of a crowdsourced effort than the last one, though I also included things that other people had come up with back then. Just so you're aware of it, this isn't all just my brain juice working these things. Now this is a build that I did to elaborate on the blind window technology that we developed pretty late in my 2-hour video. You know, back when I said that the house was looking rather plain, so I would like to try this technique out in a bigger build. And this is that, and I think it turned out great. And right next to it, we have our first little trick here that I owe to Captain Willow of the TinyGlade Discord. So essentially, these windows with both of these. So essentially, these windows with both the wooden shutters and the flower boxes, we used to have those, but they were taken out right as the demo released. But Captain Willow used blind window technology. They sort of did their own independent discovery of it and used that technology to do this with it. One thing that I decided to do with blind window technology is this, essentially an elaboration on my idea of using the lanterns as wooden supports. I'm also using blind windows to kind of create a suggestion of half timbering. Now it doesn't look fantastic. It looks serviceable enough. It's certainly, the term that I've kept using on the Discord is, I don't consider it mature technology, but I do think that there's something to be had here. Maybe somebody can make better use of it. So those are two things that I want to talk about, and then the third thing is going to be a bit of tower shapes. I'll sort of spread those throughout the video, but the same way that near the end of the last video I talked a bit about playing around with building shapes. I also want to talk a bit about playing around with rooftop shapes, which I mostly play with when it comes to towers. But yeah, that's all on this map. Let's take a closer look at some of these and I'll show you how they're done. Alright, so quick refresher. What do I mean by blind window? Let's take a block and let's take another block and put it exactly inside of it. They don't have to be perfectly matched. Two walls that are close enough to one another do work, and this is usually how players that discover this accidentally, this is how that happens to them. They just have two walls that are too close to one another. Now that I have these two blocks, essentially with identical footprint, if I try to place a window on one, we get the wall of the inside block before we get the glass of the window, right? So it has this sort of blocked out look. Now if we bring this out slightly, we can get the entire frame, which is how I did it back there. And if we bring this up, we color this one in with bricks and we bring this back down, then it has that exact bricked in look that I wanted for this build. Now the two ways to fix this are to bring this further out until we get the glass back, or if you don't want to do that because you want these two pieces to line up perfectly, then you can bring this block up, put a window underneath, bring it back down, and the inside window creating a hole in its wall that the outside window can fit in means that we no longer have this problem. Now this principle is what all of these are based on. Now, if we take this, which, yep, that is the inside block of this building. If we take this block and we bring it up, you can see that inside here we have a double window without shutters and with a flower box. And on the outside we have the double window without flower box but with shutters. And if you just slide these on top of one another, then you recapture our lost window with flower box and shutters. That's what Captain Willow discovered. One of the many things in this video that Captain Willow discovered. But honestly, I should have been able to think of this, and I didn't. But I was very glad when I saw that they posted it, because it immediately made sense to me. Anyway, the other thing that I did is this whitewashing. So you already saw how to get the frame, whitewashing, this half timbering. This half timbering. You already saw how to get the frame, so you won't be surprised if I click one of these and I bring it up. It is revealed there's one block that has all of these windows on it. All of these windows have wooden frames, and then there's another block that I slide over it, and I only get the wooden frames remaining. And that's how I create this sort of half timbering effect. That's how that works. That's really all there is to it. So those are the points about windows on this map. And then this rooftop shape. So you can see it's also just created by stacking two rooftops inside one another. But it's not something that I see too many people play with. I'll show you a couple of other towers that I did. Primarily one other tower that I did. But really think it's a shame, because it gives you a lot more options for also more realistic and medieval rooftops. Because I do feel like a lot of very medieval rooftops, they sort of slope out at the bottom, you know, go kind of horizontal, but then they gain a wicked point going up, right? So play with it. That's all I'm really trying to say, play with it. And I think with that we can actually leave this map. So let's move on. And I want to move on to this map because we have one more blind window trick here. This one's also from Captain Willow. And it's these flower boxes that we have sitting conspicuously in the street here. And it's the same principle as the window above that we've already seen. There's two blocks here, and if I lift this one out of the way, we can reveal the inside one. And what Captain Willow originally did was had like a wall, a house wall, that just had these all the way alongside it, and it looked fantastic. I didn't quite have the space for it here because of the way that I set up this little street diorama. But just be aware of that. That's another thing that you can do if you block out the entire window. Not just the glass, but the glass, the frames, the everything. Then you can get just the flower boxes. And I do think that can look quite nice. Now this rooftop is very similar to the one I just showed you. Nothing special about that. This sort of bell tower design, some people on the Discord have been using, a couple of them at this point. And I'm still looking into ways of improving it, because I feel like there's probably something that can be done with it that's a little more intricate. But I haven't invested too much time yet. I'll still look into that, and I would encourage you to give it your own shot. Now, the other elephant in the room in this map is this here slope. I've seen a couple of people use these for temples, like a Mayan Aztec temple sort of design. Here I'm using it for two purposes primarily. For one, it almost sort of, to me, looks like a wheelchair ramp, which I thought was kind of cute for a more modern looking street. And also the sides provide like a curb for this staircase that I just realized is broken in the middle. Let's bring that down a bit. And these are just rooftop pieces. This is just a long thin piece of rooftop. I have the ridge of the roof run width-wise through it. And then I've created a gable so that we get those curbs. And I bring it down and it creates this slope. Now the problem that you're gonna encounter at the top is that the roof is going to want to create, either you're gonna get those merlons or you're gonna get those smaller merlons. And it just takes some trying around. And I do believe, yeah, I have a second piece in here. You've seen this before, but you can use overlapping roofs to make merlons disappear. And I'm just using that to delete the merlons off of this big piece so that you can actually get through the top. But yeah, those are the elephants in the room. Something a little more subtle is hiding around the corner here. That is a lantern, and that is a lantern sitting on a piece of paved ground. Normally, this is supposed to be the lantern for paved ground. And this is also quite simple. I think you can recreate it easy enough. This piece is quite big for the ground that it covers, and you might wonder why I didn't shorten this up. But as you can see, as I shortened up, it has gained a bit of height. And essentially, what is inside here is terrain. And let me actually go into a blank map to demonstrate. Yeah, there you go. Let me go into a blank map to demonstrate. Alright, so essentially, if you have a piece of terrain, let's put a lantern on it so we can remember where it is. Let's make the sides as steep as we can so they take up the smallest footprint. And when you take a block, if you place the block on top of the terrain, obviously it gains some height together with the terrain. But if the block is bigger than the terrain, then it can just fit inside of it. And as you can see, as I bring this final wall past the terrain, the entire block lowers back down. So now you can raise this until it just crests the top of the terrain, and it looks like you just have a regular old lantern sitting atop a paved road. And I think you can probably actually improve this slightly by grabbing the path brush and getting the grass out of here. That sure works. So that's how you get a streetlight on paved ground. Now, you can also do this the other way around, funnily enough, where if you have a piece of terrain, let's bring this up slightly, and it only, here you go, and it only just crests this block. Then when you try to put a lantern on top of it, the block takes precedent over the terrain as to what lantern you place. So this way, you get to place one of these ground lanterns, a bit stuck in the ground, but on top of grass. And I assure you, from a distance, nobody will notice. And I do have a place where I used this, so hold on. Here you go, up on this map, where I have a lantern sitting inside this cloister. Because actually, yeah, okay, I did want to count this as a separate tip. If you've ever wanted to build something that relies on giving you this visual of, let's say, like an artificially built up plateau, by using this trick that I elaborated on with having terrain that is bigger than the, with having a building block that's bigger than the terrain, not a terrain that's bigger than the building block, by having a building block that's bigger than the terrain, that you can create this sort of artificial platform and then build on top of it, while also having grass up at this height. It's a combination that you might not think of. You might think that if you want to have grass up this high, that you can't have these sorts of retaining walls. But as long as you only need a little bit, you can create this sort of platform just by taking a max-sized block and putting the terrain underneath it. But, alright. But as long as you just need a little bit, this is something that you can look into. You know, as you can see, this is about how much terrain I managed to get in here. Which, you know, you might find interesting. But it's essentially exactly the same as the previous one. Now from there, a couple of more rooftop shapes. So this one uses 3 pieces actually. I have one piece here that I have essentially just short of being a gable. Right, and then turned exactly the other way around. I have a second piece, the exact same way, just short of being a gable. And then in between the two, rotated 45 degrees. So you can see this is the edge of that piece. Let me... Bing, bong. When did I put this in here? But inside those other two, I have this piece rotated 45 degrees so that its corners are on the long sides of the other two. And honestly, I really like the way that this looks. I discovered this by accident, trying to help somebody create a different roof shape. And it really grew on me since then, so I wanted you to know about it. That is probably one of my favorite rooftop shapes that I've created so far. And the other thing is down here. So here I just have a block with a roof stacked inside a block with battlements. And somebody very correctly pointed out that this sort of looks like a botanical garden greenhouse sort of roof. Like if you just imagined this as being all windows. I tried to somewhat emulate that with dormers and it works kind of alright. But I like the way that it looks even without the windows. And the thing that it gives you access to is having these little walkways, these little wall walks that are a lot thinner than the default wall piece that you can otherwise create. By combining it with a rooftop like this, you can get these really quite thin. Now, of course, you can adjust their thickness by pulling on the sides. However, that does tend to bring you off center, so you really have to be careful about doing it evenly on both sides. What I suggest instead is to raise and lower this rooftop. Because that can give you quite a lot of fine control over how wide you want it. And the best thing is it stays centered. But that's just another little roofing idea for your consideration. What am I changing? Who knows? Anyway, I think that is all on this map. Rooftop, rooftop, lantern, and then terrain, quote unquote, on top of an artificial plateau. That's the original prompt. Somebody had asked about getting grass onto an artificial plateau, quotation marks, in the Discord, and this was my response to that. But yeah, with that, the only other things that I have left, we actually have to build from scratch because I do not currently have a world with them ready. So, let us do some building. Alright, let's start in here with our last contribution from Captain Willow. Now, in my last video I asked, or rather pitched, the idea of using these stairs that you get in the terrain when you draw on it with a path brush. Incorporating those into a build in some way, shape or form. Let's just bring this up a bit. Let's take the path brush, go in here, V's, using V's for something. And what Captain Willow did that I thought looked great and that I can't quite emulate because I do need this map for some other stuff still, is if we took this, what we just created, and we put a couple of like workhouses around it, a couple of open workshops, that sort of thing, then you can actually use this to make quite a convincing quarry sort of location, which I thought was an extremely clever utilization of these, because yeah, of course, quarried stone, that is something that would leave behind very geometric shapes, and I thought that that was brilliant. Now, like I said, we don't have the space for that, but I will put a small shack here because I do need something to terminate something else in. Because, and I think by my list, yeah, that's the last idea that somebody else had that I'm gonna tell you about. But somebody else on the Discord did something with roads. You might remember me talking about paving the cow path last video, where I was talking about, you know, don't necessarily draw your paths straight, right? It will look a little more dynamic, a little more realistic. Let's take the smaller brush for this. You know, if we got people cutting your corners, what you would commonly call paving the cow's path. That's what I talked about. And something similar, something not necessarily relating to making a road look more dynamic, but about just making making a road look in general. The idea is to take this thinnest path brush, at least I use the thinnest one for it, though I'm sure you could also use the medium one. Oh, it's very thick. Let's stick with the thinnest one. You draw one path, somewhat like this. Now you take the other one, draw another path parallel to it. Now, if only I could execute this somewhat well. And what you get is this sort of hint, this suggestion that this is not a footpath, but this is a path that is used by carts. You know, one wheel left, one wheel right. And you get sort of road traffic. It's probably a little easier to execute while going straight. Didn't do myself any favors by doing it on this map. But yeah, I thought that was a very clever idea, and I think you guys can play around with this, find some better applications for it, maybe some more reliable ways of getting it looking good, or just use it in your builds as is. But I thought it was extremely clever and I wanted to include it here. And also, I needed it to bring my count of what I was going to show here up to 10. So I was very grateful when they came around and they posted that in the channel, and I was like, oh, right, you can do that. Now, our last thing is going to be flying buttresses. And I had thought about flying buttresses pretty early in the game's development and forgot about them again because I couldn't make them work. Another person brought them up in the Discord again, pitched their idea for it, and I would now like to present you what I've come to as my final suggestion for how to do flying buttresses. And for that, let me prepare something. Okay, so I have prepared the suggestion of a church, and now the problem that you will encounter with trying to do flying buttresses is, let's say we take some wall and we draw it through here, because obviously freehand wall is going to be the only way to do buttresses in general. Now the only way to get a flying buttress is to create an arch in our wall. However, if we try to do that, then we get the tip of the arch up here, and then it only makes contact with this wall when it's already going down again. So it doesn't really look like a flying buttress. However, if we try to draw this path further into the church, then we do get that sort of flying buttress shape, in that the peak of the arch now contacts the wall of the building. Let's raise this up a little bit, actually. However, we now have a door in the side of our church, and we would have a door every single time that we have a flying buttress. However, what didn't occur to me back in the day, but what has occurred to me now, is that we don't need to use just one piece for our church body. Because, generally, next to the nave, you also have an aisle. And those, we don't have to assume that those are part of the same block. We can have a block here for our aisle, and then have this block for our nave. And of course, when we do that, let me take this out of here so that we can still see, we don't have to worry about putting doors into this wall, because nobody will see. So, from here, we can once again grab our path brush. Let me go quite deep in there. Hold left click, and then I'll just move the camera down with my directional keys, so I can get quite straight of a wall. Now, the other way to do this would be, whoops, taking a building block, sticking it on here, and then deleting what's in between. You know, cleaning this up a bit, and then I would also have two parallel walls. The primary problem being that currently walls have sides, like a left side and a right side. And if I do it that way, the left wall and the right wall will create their arches slightly differently. Because to the game, one of these is going the other direction from the other one. So when it applies the same sort of this side goes lower, that side goes higher to both of them, it means that they're mismatched. So this way, I do it this way, so that all of my arches will be matching in how they generate. Now let's take our path brush, and once again we go in here, but this time we can go into the building with impunity. Let me try to keep this, short. Let me try to keep this so that I don't get like too much of a horizontal element in here. I want to keep it quite diagonal if I can. Yeah, that's alright. Now we take this, pull it all the way down. And then we take these and pull them up however far we want them. And that is how you get flying buttresses. Now let's paint them in appropriately. We'll ignore a bit of the brick weirdness. We'll just have to hope that our eyes glaze over that when we look at it from further away. Bring this back up a bit, maybe, so that it looks a little bit cleaner, or at least a little bit more consistent. And we'll grab our aisle, put it back in here, and presto, the suggestion. Fine. The suggestion of flying buttresses. Which honestly, I don't hate the way that they look. Depending entirely on how gracious the brick generation gods are to us, I don't hate the way that they look. Could use some refinement. I'm sure that somebody will come up with a better way of doing this, but honestly, I think visually it does its purpose. And that's what counts. And of course, flying buttresses do often have a weight, like a spire on the end of them. So if we just grab another piece, go from the outside as usual, because otherwise the game will have us snap to that part that I don't want. Alright, if we take this, put it up here. I never actually tried this before, so I'm trying this live and in color for the first time. We can put... Did I just break my aisle? Oh, that wasn't smart. I do think that we can use this to put the suggestion of a spire in here. And in fact, if we went back to my other video, my longer video, in that one I would now be telling you about how I could have used this brush to make this segment of bricks even shorter. Because I would have said to do... Whoops. To do... Alright. That ship has already sailed. Let's try it on the other one. I would have said to go in here, draw it as far as I need it. It's a little too far, actually. Draw it in there. Then grab this brush. Cut it short, cut it short, cut it short, cut it even shorter. And eventually I'm left with just one brick. Perfect. Alright. Now, classic case of do as I say, not as I do. If you're going to add spires to your build, and if you want them to be thin, or if you want to have a thicker element at the bottom, thinner element on the top, do the thinnest element first, because the thinnest element you need this brush for. And of course you can't use this brush after you've already put in a thicker element and after you've already put in the buttresses without also deleting part of the thicker section and the flying buttress section. So if you want to try and expand on the idea that I'm pitching here about using this for making spires at the ends of your flying buttresses, do the thin part first, because that's what you need the deletion brush for. And once you have that in place, you can do all of the other parts that you don't need that fine control for. These other parts where you can right click and cut off whatever access you have. Right? Do as I say, not as I do. But yeah, let me take you down here where I don't see you as much. You as well, actually. But yeah, that's about it for me. Flying but no. Wait. I have one more thing. I almost forgot. We gotta go to a different map. I should have done this earlier and I totally forgot about it. Hold up. Alright, I almost forgot. This is going to be our last thing for today. Floors. Floors in ruins. Now this isn't a trick, this isn't a technique, this is more a tip, an idea. Another one of those reminders, like play with building shape, play with rooftop shape, play with putting floors inside your ruins. Because I at least find myself struggling to find a lot of joy in my ruins because my eyes sort of get lost in the sauce. My eyes get lost in all of the walls that are sitting in the grass, and I start to be unsure of what I've even built. And putting some floors in there can give you a bit of structure back, a bit of visual clarity. So with this church in particular, for example, I can now tell, alright, so this is the nave, those are the aisles, that's the transepts, and over there where the stairs go up, that's the sanctuary and the altar behind it. Right, this gives me something to work with visually. Now there's a point to be made here about getting a bit of greenery back into this scene, but I'm sure that if you play around with your options a little bit, you'll figure out something fantastic. But this ended up being my favorite ruin that I've done, and all it is under the hood is just regular old building blocks. Minimum height, brought all the way down, and the different pieces delete each other's Merlons, so that I end up with nothing left except clean floors. So yeah, this is just something that, you know, I wanted to tell you can play around with this. If I take all of these out of here, I can still tell fine that it is a church, but I really quite enjoy the cleaner look of what we had before. Though, admittedly, this is also very nice. Like I said, one of your options. Play around with it. And with that, that's the end of my video. Hope you learned something new. Hope there's something here that you can take away and use in one of your own builds. Enjoy the demo while it is still out. We don't know when exactly we're gonna lose it, but at some point we will. So until next time, if there is a next time, because I honestly don't know if I can scrounge up another 10. But if I don't, I'll see you again in another Dev Diary video. Until then, thank you very much for tuning in. Whoops. And I'll see you again next time. It's really quite simple. It's also based on blind window technology. Now, the first thing that somebody else pointed me out to, these windows that both have the wooden shutter and the flower boxes, we used to just get those. However, in the most recent versions, they don't currently generate. But Captain Willow from the Tiny